Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Sommer, and I thank you very much for joining us today. I think we'll have a very interesting discussion because we talk a lot about AI as a technology shift. But what's becoming increasingly clear is that AI is actually forcing a redesign of the data organization itself. How teams get structured, where accountability sits, what skills matter the most, and how trust and context gets built into day-to-day decisions. And that's really what I want to double click on today a little bit. Because I think we're waking up to this new reality where sort of the traditional pyramid, traditional hierarchies and operating models in organizations are under pressure because data is no longer just in one place. With all of the multimodal data out there, data lives everywhere in your organization. And agentic is a huge theme that everyone is speaking about, and they're just waiting to get more autonomy. At the same time, roles and responsibilities, and we'll double click on that quite a bit today, are changing as well. We'll all be kind of digital CEOs, or at least managers, that will need to learn how to orchestrate and manage agents around us. And we're kind of in this interesting dynamic as well, where execution and empowerment looks completely different when we have all of this innovation on one end, right? The innovation cycles have never been faster, but we also have to kind of adhere to policy as well. But execution and empowerment is outpacing policy. So this is no longer about sort of choosing a side. It's about learning a new motion altogether that can handle all of this. Because I have the great privilege at Click to do our annual 2026 outlook. And what we spoke about there is at Click, we think that we need to increasingly move from oscillation, this constant pendulum shift from centralization to decentralization, increasingly to orchestration as well, and towards a model where trust, adaptability, and interoperability, number two, and then context, number three, are deliberately connected across data, analytics, and AI. So with that, let's kick off the discussion and hopefully it will stay practical. So what's actually changing in organizations and what's proving hard and what's actually working? As I said, my name is Dan Sommer. I'm the global lead for market intelligence here at Click. And with me today, I've got a set of very highly distinguished leaders in the space. And I would like them to introduce themselves. It's Sharad, Gopal, and Sarang. Over to you.
Yeah, hi, thanks, everyone. My name is Sharad Kumar. I'm the Global Solution CTO of Data and AI at Click. So in my role, I'm responsible for building repeatable, value-added solutions that drive outcomes for our customers. A little over 30 years in the industry around data and AI, worked with in advisory and consulting most of my career, helping large customers in their data and AI modernization journey. So looking forward to an active discussion here.
Gopal, over to you.
Hi, my name is Gopal Subramanian. I've been in this industry for over 37 years, primarily on data and AI space. Currently, I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer for Focus, primarily working on changing that organization more to be a data and AI centric and transforming the place.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarang Deshpande. I serve as the VP of Data and Analytics at Franciscan Health. We are a faith-based, mission-driven health system, across the Midwest with hospitals and ambulatory sites providing compassionate, high-quality care. Just like most of my CDO peers, my focus is on building our data analytics, AI capabilities, trusted decision-making across clinical and non-clinical areas. And as it relates to the topic today, most recently, my focus has been on what our redesign of the data organization looks like, because we are in that shift from traditional analytics to a more platform-driven AI-enabled capability. So very excited to be here today and looking forward to this chat.
So do I. Thank you so much. All right. So let's start where we kind of left off. This notion of moving from oscillation to orchestrations. And you mentioned both, and Sharad, you've seen, like in your engagement as well, a lot of organizations are in flux. So I'd be really curious to hear this notion of oscillation versus orchestration. Are you seeing synergies being captured in the business units and innovation that's happening at the edges at the same time as you can capture governance and trust in the centralized core as well? So anyone that wants to kind of start off on that one?
I'm happy to go first. So my personal opinion, Dan, I think is that most organizations, they think that they've moved past that oscillation, but they truly haven't. They've really just relabeled it. I can speak to healthcare at least, which may be a slightly more nuanced industry. But I think in most places, including ours, where that oscillation still shows up is in data ownership, which relates to data governance, and then where the execution happens. So we've gone back and forth about this in terms of where we are landing is centralizing our core competencies with data engineering, data governance, and now extending that to AI governance for the sake of consistency and standardization, but then decentralizing some or most of the analytics and AI execution so that that stays closer to the clinical and operational workflow. So in my mind, the real shift to orchestration only happens when this debate about work structure and where do people report to and where do functions reside, that shifts more towards a standardize the platform, federate the accountability, and then embed governance in the front-end workflow itself. So it's not a dirty word that, there's some super cop sitting in IT or another operational area trying to govern everything. And AI is only going to expose these gaps immediately. So if our data is not aligned, the models won't be trusted. And that's what we are pushing for, is to operationalize this orchestration in a hub that controls some of the governance and then federating the execution outside.
Interesting. So it sounds like a lot of that is actually on the platform side as well, and not just having the police officers going around when it comes to governance.
That's going to be a big theme of what I talk about today, yes.
Very interesting. Gopal, is that similar to...
Yeah, I'll add a couple of more. So I have three things that we are trying to do. The first one I would say is we are actually moving away from the way in which we have done in the past, which is siloed way of looking at data, application-centric way of looking at data, to a more data-centric approach, which is a unified data strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So that's the first shift I see. The second shift I see is from ad hoc analytics, Excel-based and whatnot, to an integrated AI workflows, which has context. So I can see the shift moving there. The third shift, I think, to Sarang's point, there's a lot of data and AI governance practices are put in place, structures put in place, and there's a lot more collaboration I see between various organizations, because eventually the ultimate goal is the same for everyone. And I see a lot more collaboration across privacy team, compliance team, technology, business partners, domain experts. So all of those are coming together for a single cause, saying that let's do a proper governed structure, both from the data and AI perspective. I see that as a three big shifts, and we'll talk more about what we are doing.
Very interesting. Thank you. Sharad, is that, with your engagements, does that ring true?
Yeah, pretty much true. So the way I look at it is, so when I talk to organizations, the ones when they start off early, right? A lot of this innovation and building of data and AI tends to be at the edges, right? Kind of in yours. But in order for them to scale beyond experimentation to productize, I think they all very quickly realize they need some kind of federated structure where things like platform, governance, and data foundation are centralized, but data products, use case, and those kind of things are owned within the business domains, right? Because they already, unless you have the proper guardrails around it, you cannot really scale AI. You cannot have what I call coordinated autonomy without the right guardrails. And guardrails is where you build a central platform, you build your governance, you put the guardrails, and now at the edges, innovation can happen faster because you have the conviction that you have the right set of guardrails and controls. So it's really, you can have controls, but still be able to move with agility at speed, right? without having to worry. So that's what I'm seeing mature organizations go from start off in silos and very quickly realize they need to have some level type of federated structure with centralized governance and controls and foundation and platforms.
I think, Sharad, just to add to that, I think one of the things which is key for us, I'm sure it is for a lot of the organization, because you don't want to have everything as a centralized and having a ticket system to wait for to get a solution done. So we talk a lot about democratizing data and democratizing AI. The only way we can do is what just Sharad said, is you build a horizontal practice that can scale. And then you have a vertical one where innovation happens, and you can do it much faster. So experimentation is another thing when it comes to AI. That's such a key thing that we need to do, because you are starting with a hypothesis, right? And experimentation is all about hypothesis. You can either be successful with the hypothesis or prove it or disprove it. It's not like a success or a failure, but you either prove or disprove. And that happens at the edges.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we already have a question from a certain Valerie Logan. This might be the Valerie Logan, who is my friend and former Gartner analyst. I don't know. It might be a common name as well, so I might be preempting that. But the question is, orchestration, yes, it is her. Orchestration is spot on. This is systemic, as Gopal said. Collaboration at scale with adaptability is the key. The question is, who are the conductors of this new orchestra? Anyone wants to take that?
Sure, I can give it a shot. When you think about an orchestration here, for example, right? And I gave an example of experimentation, and you can think of many way of thinking about it. One is a scan, try, and a scale. You scan for an idea, scan for a use case. You have a value of the use case. Maybe that use case needs a try. And as you start thinking about moving from scan to try, who's orchestrating it? We have an AI lead who can think about that use case, working with the business partners. There's a value to it. But again, they are just orchestrating to make sure that we can try. But there are people like privacy lawyers, compliance officers, domain experts. We come together, and that's where the discussion happens, to make sure that we are doing it the right way, the right questions are being asked for before we actually go into a try mode. Now, there's an innovation piece of it. There's a little bit of, I won't call it the bureaucracy, but a thin layer of governance piece of it. Now you try, who's orchestrating between try and scale? The data scientist, the data lead, the data scientist, the AI lead now take that experimentation, they do iterative, and now they feel that the hypothesis is successful. Now we go into the try mode. From try to the scale mode, we go back to the same community, and now their questions are different. Is the algorithm fair? Do you have transparency in this algorithm? So the questions become different, but there's a person who is orchestrating, but there are many people collaborating to make sure. It's basically, if you think about a race symmetric, somebody is responsible, somebody is accountable. There are many people responsible for it, right? So it's not a one-man show. It is also not one unit show, meaning it is not a business problem that a business people have to solve. It's a business and technology coming together problem that's getting solved nowadays. And that's the reason why I iterated the point about collaboration.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to dive into a little bit, because it's already come up, data foundations and trust. Boards are all asking for an AI strategy, but without a solid data foundation, it's just slideware. And Gopal, when we prepped for this a week ago, you said something interesting to me in reframing the conversation from, like, it shouldn't be AI strategy, it should be value from AI. So I find that interesting. And how do you sort of square that with building the data foundation first?
Sure.
And then I have you to fill in as well. Sorry.
Yeah. So the reason why I said AI strategy, I don't know what that means. Right? At the end of it, we have to create value to our business.
Yes.
Technology is a vehicle. AI and your algorithms are just vehicle to get it solved. So if you start by AI strategy, you might build a phenomenal tool. Might be useless to your business. Right? So that was my point when I spoke to you, Dan, right? So what we are doing right now, obviously, we are looking at, as I said, we are a siloed, it's a very siloed way of thinking right now, and we are converting that to a more solid data foundation. And I'll give you an example. When I started at Focus, a year and 4 months back, I interviewed some folks, a lot of folks actually. And what I found was, and this might be true to all organizations, you have to figure it out. At least as you mature, you'll understand what I'm saying here. 80% of the time, they are looking for data. 20% of the time, they are creating insights. When I say data strategy, if we flip that, the data strategy is successful. Less time on finding data, more time on creating insights. In a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do. Now, how do you do that? So in every organization, and as I started off with the introduction saying that we are moving from an application to a data-centric organization, if you think about a data-centric organization across the board, depending on your verticals, there are certain data domains that you can define. For a wealth management space, there are 13 such domains that we have already defined. What's a domain? It's nothing but a group of your entities coming together, logical areas, right? Client could be a domain. Firm could be a domain, employee could be a domain, portfolio could be a domain, whatnot. You build these data domains once and reuse it multiple times. So what you have done there is you have reduced fragmentation and duplication of data. So in a nutshell, our data strategy is revolving around these 13 domains that we are building and executing, right? Have a unified data model, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, our goal there is we build it. Now, when you think about the benefits, you would probably have an intelligent context when it comes to AI. You're not searching for the data, but you have the data there. You can start thinking about how am I going to use the data. You have single source of truth to worry about. If there's a problem, you don't disconnect in 14 different places. You can go to a single source of truth and correct it, which is a master copy, and then the rest could be a slave. You're reusing the data, right? And the last one, I would say, which is very, very important as well, is now you're talking about a common vocabulary. Client, this is what we mean by client, as an example, right? So that's our first step when you think about a data strategy before we go into an AI piece. I'll pause there, but that's what we're doing.
So Sarang, in 13 domains, what does it look like in your space? Or
I'm actually a little happy that, what I'm hearing from Gopal. See, the traditional view has been that healthcare, especially on the provider side, we've been behind the curve in some of these, but it looks like we're all in the exact same boat. So it's a little bit heartening for me. So nothing new necessarily to add, but I agree with the premise, I guess, Dan, that you laid out, that a lot of it is still slideware. I think the two main things that come to mind is we need to anchor all of our work, whether it's data analytics and now AI. And then the back end, it has to be in data readiness. And on the front end, in what we, on the healthcare side, we think of it as measurable outcomes. These could be clinical outcomes, patient-related outcomes. It could be financial ones. So I think reframing the conversation away from what is your AI strategy to what, like Gopal said, right? Where can AI create real near-term value, and then working backwards to make sure that the data that is required to support that is there. So two things I think very similar to what Gopal said that my focus is on is standardizing and operationalizing our core data layer, right? So trusted, reusable data products across clinical, operational, all of these domains. And these are not just pipelines, but clearly defined, governed data assets and data sets that now the models can train on. And the second, I think, big for me is embedding governance and the lifecycle management of these upfront. So data quality, data lineage, definitions, like Gopal said, right? Again, not just doing it in the back end through a committee or a council structure necessarily, but how can we put it in the front end of the workflow so that it just becomes part of life and not this back end governance process that everybody then, thinks of it as a chore that they have to go to another meeting and discuss these things. So once I think that gets embedded in the front end and even just becomes second nature, that's when I think real success in terms of a solid data foundation will lead to, better AI outcomes as well.
Thank you. So that's what we're seeing as well with the most mature organizations, with the data foundations and the metadata increasingly becoming active. And to your point there, embedding governance in the life cycle and in the workflows much more than, let's say, the case was 10, 15 years ago. Sharad, I want you to sort of weigh in a little bit on trust as well.
Yeah.
It's a non-negotiable. And I know you've been a big champion of it inside of Click, and speaking to customers. What have they done or wish they'd done earlier around data quality and integration to enable trustworthy AI, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think I agree with both Gopal and Sarang say that AI strategy without a data foundation just is aspiration, right? You cannot really achieve it without. Now, I think it's important to understand why data foundation is becoming even more critical. So as we move from, in my view, as we move from the world of traditional AI, right, or regular analytic, which is all predictive, classifying, more insight generation, where humans are always in the loop and consuming the output, where AI is operating in bounded workflows. Now we're moving to this agentic world, right, where it's becoming more autonomous. You're planning, you're executing, is real-time decision loops, and your errors could propagate automatically, right? So when I look at those two worlds, in the traditional world, I looked at data foundation as morely an informational layer, that you're providing the information to classify. But in the agentic world, it starts to become that trusted intelligence layer, right? Because as AI moves from advising to acting, just like you said, Dan, the tolerance for, in my mind, stale, inconsistent, or low quality data pretty much drops to near zero. Because every time you had bad data, when you're looking at a report or looking at a bad classification from AI, human is making decisions much easier. Now you leave it to the machine, autonomous. So I think good quality data. So I actually break it down to 5 major things: the data foundation, right? Agents cannot operate on stale data, so you better have near real-time data, right? Good quality data, right? We talked about autonomous decisions will amplify bad data, right? So you could have the best model operating on bad data, you're still going to get poor results. I think Gopal mentioned this really well, that without that semantic layer and the context, you're going to see a lot of hallucination and your risk is going to increase. So that's third. Fourth, in my mind, and I think Sarang said that beautifully, is you got to have your data foundation, which embeds governance in it. Who can access, what data is restricted, what are the regulatory constraints? And fifth one, I would say, is that agents cannot act on raw data. So it's more about data products, which are curated, business domain aligned. So in my mind, I keep those 5 principles in view when I talk to customers, how they should look at the data foundation for this new kind of agentic world.
Very useful. Thank you. I want to shift gears a little bit and go right at the bullseye towards the topic du jour around organizations, roles, and skills. And it's already been discussed to an extent, but it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more around how your data and AI org is being redesigned. And I'll let Sarang kick off here. There's a number of aspects here I'm curious about. Number one, compared to a couple of years ago, how does your data and AI organization look different today? But also, which roles or teams have emerged and which are being reshaped? And this is also consistent with one of the questions we've gotten in the Q&A here, where they're asking the evolving impact of AI on data organizations and data roles, such as data analysts, the question asks, data architects, data engineers, BI developers, and data scientists. Do you believe these are at risk of being significantly transformed or replaced by AI, and why?
Yep. So I'll get to the specific roles in the second part, but just to give some background context, right? So in healthcare, I can speak to, we have been historically optimized for reporting. That's what we are good at. It's bread and butter. I think that model of staffing is clearly, it's not going to hold for AI. So, but at the same time, just new roles is not enough, right? Accountability is now going to be at a completely different level in terms of requiring that to all the points that have been made. So, because if no one owns the data product, and as an extension now the model life cycle and the outcome of those, then scaling AI is not going to happen. So I think for us, when I think of reorganizing, it's around platforms, like we talked about, products or assets, and then governance as an execution arm and not just as an oversight arm, right? So to me, we're focusing heavily on what needs to be our platform engineering strategy, right? Gopal said that siloed applications is how we've done business always. These are clinical applications. There's one leader and all they know and do day in and day out is just optimizing those apps. Business applications is the same way. And then, shared services models where finance and supply chain, revenue cycle, they're doing their own thing. So we're trying to move away from that to a more platform engineering to be the new core. Data product ownership, right? Aligning that with clinical and business owners is, again, critical. And then operationalizing governance. So that's kind of the principles that we are operating within. In my mind, I think the shift in terms of analysts and engineers and all of those roles, we are focusing on a couple of things. One is we need to build our program management or governance capability around AI. That's the central hub that I think of, right? We talked about. So for that, we are looking to add some more strength around program management, product management, because we are in a hybrid environment. Historically, we have relied on our enterprise vendors to provide most of the capabilities to us. Now we are being forced to develop some things and move into an arena that we are not used to, which is software development to some extent. So having those quarterbacks who can manage relationships with vendors, with our own technology teams, with our stakeholders, that's a type of role. And that's both technical and program management. So we are trying to figure out what that mix is going to be. And then last thing, I am trying to educate our teams. I think it has not dawned upon a lot of people that the traditional report writer, the dashboard developer, the analyst that just does back-end technical work, that's going to go away. I mean, whether you think of GitHub Copilot or even all of the tools that are coming out through standardized vendors, I think all that's going to go away. Traditional dashboards are going to die. So how can we evolve to the point where, again, with strong data foundations, we need to be building agents. We need to be building more interactive chatbot type of application. I mean, this morning, I was having a conversation with one of my leaders saying, that's what the future is going to be. No one's going to come to us and ask us to build a dashboard that is static with 10 visualizations. And then every time a change needs to be made, they have to keep coming back to us, open tickets. All that's going to go away. So in my mind, that's going to be the shift is, again, back to the point you had made, Dan, as orchestrators and enablers rather than actual doers of a lot of the analytical work that we have today.
Understood. Gopal, do you want to fill in anything?
Sarang pretty much said everything. But if I have to reiterate some of the things that Sarang mentioned, one, I think definitely there is a shift to become a platform architect, platform engineers, etc., etc. Now, let me also define what I mean by a platform. I've heard this from others, and I've learned it from them as well. We talk a lot about projects long time back. Then we moved to products. Now we talk about platform, right? The definition that I have learned about platform is this: you have producer of information, you have consumer of information. Platform should make it easy for both the parties. That's actually a definition of a platform that I learned from somebody. And it makes so much of sense if you think about it. What it is saying, take a look at Uber. You have on the left-hand side a producer, you have a consumer on the right-hand side. You don't care what the technology within Uber is, but it makes it easy for both the producers and consumer to actually get value out of it. That's a platform. YouTube is another good example. You have video creators, video viewers, producers, consumers. You don't care what YouTube has as a technology. So when we think about a platform, that's a shift we see. How can you create actually a platform? And if your business is scaling, the platform should scale accordingly. Uber started with cars. Now we have Uber Eats, etc., etc. So how do you think about it? I think that's a big shift that is coming into the industry, how we are thinking. And now we are accommodating the skill set to develop those platforms, whether it's an architect's role or an engineer role or whatever that role is, right? So that's one big shift I see. The second, I think, Sarang, you talked a lot about dashboarding going away. So I see a BI analyst more moving towards, I would say, insight generation, experimentation, rather than creating these reports. How can I drive actions from the data that I have much better than what it is than showing out some report which might not be valid 10 minutes from now? right?
Yep.
So I definitely see that getting shifted as we are moving towards what I see at least. The third one, now, when going back to you asked a question about new skills as well. What I can now see is, now I see a lot more data product managers coming out of this who are now thinking not just creating something on the data side, but they're taking end to end to see what's a business outcome. For example, they are looking at what's the next best action for my client. They are responsible to create a data product that will be usable, that can tell you what's the next best action, right? So it is not just creating an engineering thing and I don't know who's going to use it. So I see there's a shift in that piece. The other thing is obviously with AI coming in, the Gen AI specialists who can actually do a better job of prompt engineering and workflow orchestration, and actually model validators are coming into place. That's different than what we saw in the past, right? Obviously, Sarang spoke a lot about governance, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. But the most important thing that is shifting there is, how do I trust this AI? Where should I override AI versus continue with what you have? Because tomorrow you are questionable. If somebody comes and says, explain this, you need to be in a position to explain it. So there's a little bit of a skill sets change there in terms of what we are looking for. The last one, I'll stop after this, is what I am seeing emerging skill sets coming more and more, is what I'm just calling it. And I stole this from an MIT professor maybe 20 years back. He said this, what a prediction he had. And I'm going to steal his thing. He called it as a translators. I'm just calling it as analytics translators. And what does that mean? You have business on the left-hand side. You have your AI technology experts on the right-hand side. Sometimes they don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to translate what's happening on the left and make sure we are creating the right platform or the product on the right-hand side. So I see more and more of that role emerging as well.
Super interesting. So yeah, picking up on a couple of things that you both said, the visualization and the insight generation and the dashboards going away, but the data products, you keep talking about that as the trusted vehicle. That's also going to serve as sort of, you can have these insight generators, but you have to make sure that those insights can be reused, which is the whole purpose of data products. So sometimes you want ad hoc analytics for insight generators, but they should also be trusted. But in other cases, you want persistent analytics that keep, you want the same KPIs, the same metrics, the same definitions. So it's straddling that balance a little bit. Sharad, do you have any insights into what was said in terms of this?
So I think Gopal's uncovered a lot of good ground, right? So what I see, data teams morphing, changing, transforming, right? So data product owner, data product management, absolutely key. Organizing around outcomes, business-ready data. Platform engineering, absolutely. Gopal with this point multiple times, building that scalable data AI infrastructure with enabling capabilities for producers and consumers. I'm seeing that. The third role I'm seeing is really, which is emerging more, I call it AI/agent engineering teams, right? So this is now, you're really becoming workflow orchestrators, right? Models are already there, tools are there, right? Data is somewhere else. How do you orchestrate all of this sort of AI, and how do you deploy? How do you scale? Cost management, all that new thing is coming. So basically what I'm seeing is with AI, it's not the nature of what the work needs to get done is not changing, it's how humans contribute to work is changing, right? And I think Sarang made this point, is we are moving away from task orientation, writing SQL, preparing report, reconciling data, building dashboard, to more designing systems, supervising AI, orchestrating workflows, governing outcomes. So we're really becoming orchestrator. I think the only couple of points I will add is, if I look at data engineers, right? Somebody asked this question. I don't think that the role is going away, but the focus a little bit changes. Instead of building old-fashioned ETL pipeline, the data engineers are going to be more focused on real time. They're going to be more closely aligned to data product teams, more closely aligned to business domains and outcomes, and really now making sure the data is enabled for AI and agents to safely consume, right? So I think the role doesn't go away, the focus shifts. The same thing I think both Sarang and Gopal said, data analyst, you're not going to build dashboard, you're not going to do ad hoc analysis. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be curating these assets, you'll be guiding AI, and you'll be interpreting AI recommendation, right? So AI engines are going to plan, they're going to recommend, they're going to reason. So what is human role now? You got to look at that. So what does it mean? What's the interpretation? What's the explanation? So you really become shifting from report creators to insight validators, storytellers. That's the kind of role will evolve in my mind for the data analyst, right? So the role doesn't go away. It's evolution of this role into less task orientation, more orchestrator, validators, storytellers.
Yeah, one last thing that I'll add to that point Sharad just made. I think in our case, right, domain understanding or subject matter expertise, as it relates to healthcare at least, it's critical.
Yeah.
And we've invested a lot of time in getting these analysts to that point where we don't want to lose all of that. So the only, I think, logical way, and let's face it, the way the economy is going, the market is, you can't just keep adding FTEs and tag them on. So the idea is you upskill your people who understand the business, the care delivery side in our case, and make them as those orchestrators or people who can translate, like Gopal said, right? And then some targeted hiring has to happen, platform engineering, AI engineering. Those are skills we've never had, we've never developed, and those are not just something you can pick up overnight. But at the speed of execution that is expected, that's where we will focus on very limited hiring that we can do is on those roles, while upskilling our own teams to be more business focused orchestrators and supervisors of whether they're models or agents down the road.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the spirit of rationalization in this economy, like you mentioned, in the spirit of curation, like you mentioned, Sharad, this is a question that came through. You described the decision to centralize data engineering and governance while decentralizing AI and analytics. I think it was referring to Sarang's point. How does your organization ensure that AI solutions, internal or external, don't overlap in capability, driving unnecessary infrastructure plus cost? Is there a team that is responsible for AI tool rationalization? And if so, who?
I mean, I can say, again, I'm going to be blunt. We've struggled for years to even do application rationalization, right? So organizations that operate in a federated manner where there might be regions or individual business units that don't report up to necessarily the same structure or are not governed centrally, there's always going to be application sprawl and now AI sprawl. So I don't have a silver bullet for that, honestly, but the only way, again, we are going to try to tackle it is centralize the intake for any new AI solutions. Thankfully, there's enough fear in terms of privacy, security, data quality issues where at least people are coming to the table. So centralizing the intake, review, assessment on the front end, having legal and risk and security and compliance all at the table, that'll give us a view into what might be coming. Can't control all of it, but that helps. And then again, having a relatively light, governance process, right? And I think of that as a tiered governance process. There are some features, some solutions that do not need, days and days and weeks of assessment and review. So, I mean, Copilot, documentation assistance tool, those type of things, they are very different from true clinical decision support tools where, patient decisions are going to be impacted. So having a tiered governance process so that people don't feel that, it's a blocker rather than an enabler, so right sizing that is key. And then I think providing a path in terms of pre-approved data, reusable components like we've talked about, standard integration, that'll just help build trust that, okay, this is just, again, not another governing body that's going to slow us down. That's the only way to bring and reduce that sprawl, bringing all of those into a centralized. And the last thing, we have not figured this out yet, but we're looking at ways to build an inventory of these solutions. And these are going to be across build and buy and everything in between. So that centralized inventory and then building a whole risk and privacy and compliance model around that, that's what we are pushing for in order to get our hands around what that sprawl could quickly get to if we don't control it.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on. I want to sort of address the elephant in the room, if you like, agents and orchestrating agents. And I'll let Gopal take lead on this one, and Sharad, you can fill in as well, and Sarang. Oh, so we're seeing more and more automation coming. It's just a force of nature at this point, and the gradual shift from people. You were on this from task doers increasingly to supervisors and orchestrators. It's early days still, but I'd be super curious to see, like, what are you observing in terms of agentic evolving in your organizations, and like, who owns that governance of agents? Is it again like the codification more, or like is there specific owners of agentic? Anyone wants to take a stab at that? And do you see agents also evolving as a part B? Is it in the platform, or is it more? Are you seeing MCP evolving as well, where agents are speaking to agents and data is speaking to data, etc.? So multi-tiered question. I don't know how you want to address it. Gopal, you want to take a stab?
Sure. There are many questions in that, but
Yes.
The way in which I'm approaching the problem, at least for focus, is very practical. Okay, I mean, agentic is a digital twin. All of those are great things that people are talking about. How is it relevant to my business? That's a key thing for me, right? So, for example, one of the things that we are looking at, agents as an example, and agents as an example, as a definition, it does something, a unique task end to end. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm simplifying the definition. So if you think about that, we have a use case and we are working on that. And the use case is we buy companies and we need to make sure that we can integrate those companies faster as far as technology is concerned. Let's take an example. CRM is one of those things. Let's say we want to integrate into a target state CRM, right? So what happens is there are a bunch of team members who actually have to look at the old CRM system. They do a source to target mapping to our new target CRM system. And then somebody needs to write an ingestion framework to move from the source to target mapping into your target platform. An easy, simple example, right, of the work that they are doing today. The work might take by itself a manual work. Let's say it takes about 5 weeks as an example, or 6 weeks. So is there an opportunity for us to automate it? And we can do a good job of doing that. And what we have decided is to create 2 agents. One agent is called a data analyst agent. And the other agent is your engineering agent. And the data analyst agent can actually replicate the job in this example of source to target mapping, because we have fed in enough information about the target state. And on the left-hand side, you have certain patterns. The pattern could be an existing Salesforce, different instance to a new one, or Microsoft Dynamics to the Salesforce. So there are certain X number of patterns that we can train this model. And now they can create the document, which was taking us, let's say, 3.5 weeks to create the document. Maybe now it can be done within a week. Obviously, there's a human in the mix to make sure that everything is fine. Okay. Now, when that kicks off and that creates the document, we have another agent wake up and say, hey, I have this document. I need to pump it into the target state. That's your engineering agent, right? So that basically does, again, the human in loop quality checks, and then it moves on. Where am I going with this is, instead of getting caught up, which is, again, my definition, okay? Instead of getting caught up with all of these technologies, what is right for your business in terms of whether we use this technology or not? Similarly, digital twin is another good example. People are talking about it. Again, how is it related to you? Now you can think about it saying that, hey, I'm advising certain stuff for tax. Maybe I can create a tax expert as a digital twin, right? So my point I'm making is there is an automation piece of it. There is an agentic piece of it. There is just a machine learning piece of it. You don't need an LLM to solve a particular problem. It all depends on what use case we are talking about, rather than having it as a generic for, yeah, this is moving forward. That was my point of an example.
Beautiful. And that goes straight to one of the questions, Sarang, if you dare to take it on. Just curious if any of you esteemed speakers, organizations are focused on probabilistic or deterministic AI initiatives, right? You spoke both about probabilistic and deterministic there, machine learning and some of the LLM technologies, AI initiatives, as both can have different outcomes as we are constantly pressured by board to deliver quick wins given our investments. Any views on that?
So yeah, for us, I'll say again, fully candid, we are not quite there yet. We have a lot of just basic blocking and tackling to do. Our focus has been, while we build our foundational components, we are relying on our enterprise vendors, whether it's ERP in the clinical space, our EMR vendor, and others to deliver most of the ready to implement type of solutioning today. So now, we've always had predictive models and, that can predict if a patient's at a higher risk of fall, that can predict what the length of stay of the patient needs to be. So we've always had those. One can classify them as those type of predictive AI models now. But yeah, truly probabilistic, deterministic AI initiatives and agents around that, we are not quite there yet. Gopal and Sharad might have a better perspective on that.
I'll just add one to it, and I'll give it to Sharad. The only thing I would say is right now we are starting more with deterministic only because we can explain models, and we are a very regulatory kind of organization, especially in the financial industry. So we need to make it reliable, repeatable, kind of a model that we need to create. As I said, we create the model. We have to actually look at what's a drift and get back to the AI committee saying that this is how we are managing drifts and whatnot. So there is a lot more that we cannot take a chance when it comes to probabilistic. So we are actually embarking on more on the deterministic side, but there could be some use cases where we have to use both. But at this point of time, I would say in the journey that we are in, it is we want it to be reliable and explainable as the key piece of what we are trying to do.
So that's great answers from both of you. And Sarang, I think many people on the call are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief when they're hearing that your honesty there. I think many organizations are there. Sharad, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so a couple of things I would add. I think I like what Gopal said, that when you look at agentic, you have to start with the problem statement and understanding, right? And then from there, where you come up with single agent solution, multi-agent solution. Then the second, what does the agent do? Now, this goes back to orchestration. The people who are building this, and again, let me back up one sec. You mentioned that, Dan. There are two paths there when you define an agent. And Sarang said they're using largely in-platform agents. So Salesforce, Workday, they're all providing agents that do certain things well within their platform. But then there's a build option. A lot of customers are building their own agents on top of these LLMs and other models. So when you build their own, it largely becomes an orchestration problem. Like, how do you orchestrate different things? And Gopal and Sarang both said, not every problem you're going to go to an LLM. So sometimes you have deterministic calculation to be done. So you may actually go back into your BI layer where those metrics are defined and governed, and your agent would call them to get the deterministic answer. Okay, what does my revenue look like, right? Now, at the same time, you'll also use the reasoning power of the LLM along with it. If you want to do plan, you want to reason, you want to think, you want to recommend, that's where LLMs excel. So, or sometimes you may have plugged into it a traditional AI/ML model that you have built. So in my mind, it goes back to person building the agent is an orchestration problem. How do you orchestrate for the outcome, these different things that are available to you? Your BI layer is already there. Tap into your BI layer for deterministic calculations on business metrics. Tap into your LLM layer for reasoning, planning, thinking. Reach out to your tools layer to have access to actions. LLMs and these agents cannot act by themselves. They need access to tools, right? To post trouble ticket, to take action. So I think it becomes an orchestration problem, like you said, from a different, not an organizational level, but really you start to build and bind all of these into what does your workflow look like to really achieve that outcome, right? And then what a lot of things I'm also seeing is going back to a platform discussion. A lot of the AI capabilities, common capabilities being built in the platform. For example, one customer I saw, they're actually putting a model routing layer in the platform. Because cost is a big thing. So let's say if you just want a simple classification, why do you want the GPT 5.2, right? Or the largest model? You can go with a smaller model, which is cheaper and quicker. But for deeper reasoning tasks, we go to a bigger model. So how do you achieve that? You can put a model routing layer, which sees what kind of tasks need to be done, routes it to the right, which controls costs and stuff, right? Platform layers where you build in the guardrails. I saw a question somewhere. What can agents do? What data can they access? What role can they play? What tool can they invoke? Where do you control that? You control that at the platform layer, right? So again, it goes back to that whole federated. You still evolve your foundation for agentic to put certain controls, monitoring, deployment, all those things at the platform layer and the guardrails, but a lot of the workflow, how to orchestrate different tools to achieve the outcome, stays at the agentic layer.
Okay. All right, excellent. I want to address some use cases here as well. Use cases that you've done in your specific industries, healthcare and financial services that you come from. You've shared some of this as well. So, but can you each share one AI use case in production and the main lesson it taught you about data foundation and organizational setup that you already need? So, do you feel this is superfluous, or do you have anything more to add?
I can start.
So quickly talk about. Sorry, go ahead, Gopal.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I think, listen, our use cases, again, in healthcare on the provider side, there'll be a little nuance, but one example I gave earlier, right? Predicting how long a patient will stay in the hospital and then appropriately planning discharge for those patients, right? That's a clinical use case that we have in place. It's continued to be refined. But again, I think the timeliness and the context of the data is critical there, because more than the algorithm, because if it's not current and if it's not aligned with how the care team actually thinks about the patient journey, those predictions are not going to be very actionable. And then on the non-clinical side, plenty of things. A revenue cycle actually is a very big area. So for example, it's a huge life cycle for a denial of a claim. So when a patient shows up and when you bill the patient, the claim that goes to the insurer, the denials are in the millions of dollars. And then prioritizing those which denials to work on, that's another use case that is very popular, very common, because, again, the problem here is the same. Data consistency, that matters more than the sophistication of the model. Can that be integrated in the workflow of a claims analyst, right, when they're actually working through it? And then who's going to own the actual model outcome and whether something should or should not be done? So I think, to me, plenty of things that are in the pipeline and in production, Dan, but many issues still plague us around how to proper manage and can we trust. So all of the same things we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so.
Gotcha. Now, I'll make it quick. The way in which we are looking at our whole AI implementation, we have three pillars. Well, the first pillar I call independent AI, which is it doesn't depend on your data. You don't need a data platform, because people keep saying, when will you build the data platform? Should I have to wait till the data platform is done? The answer is no. We can do independent AI. For example, our advisors spend a lot of time with the clients and they take notes. There's so many tools in the market that can summarize everything for you. That saves 10 minutes per advisor, per client meeting, and that gives back the time back to advisor. They don't need your data. Okay? And there are many use cases like that. The second pillar of AI use cases, which I call strategic AI. As you are implementing a solution, I'll take a solution that we are implementing, let's say CRM, Salesforce. Salesforce does not have a lead scoring. So which means today you have 3,000 leads, and marketing and sales people have to call 3,000 people to figure out maybe one of them convert to a client. There are lead scoring algorithms available in the market, tools in the market, products in the market that will integrate with your Salesforce. So as you are building your strategic platforms, if there are gaps in the AI, there are tools in the market that you can actually buy and integrate. That's a second piece of your AI strategy. You don't still need your data platform, because 13 domains I talked about is still not ready maybe, but you still can apply and deliver something. The third one is what you probably need your data platform. And we are talking about a lot of the stuff that we own today. Those are your differentiator. The client data I have, the data that I have, you don't have it. How do I differentiate myself? And there are many such use cases that you can create. One could be a client 360. How can I personalize my client experience much better because I know them based on the data that I have? Plus external factors that is there in the market, maybe I can provide them good insights for their financial planning, right? So for that, you need the data. Then you have your portfolio construction. How can I do a better job of portfolio construction? I probably need the data to do some better job of portfolio construction and optimization. So that could be another use case where AI could be used, right? So every organization doesn't have to say, I need all the data to get it done. They can have a strategy for AI, which could be broken down into these three pillars.
Perfect. So I want to start wrapping, but before I do that, Sharad, there was a question coming in. Is there a specific nuance to very large organizations, perhaps multi-billion, 100K plus employee companies that you see? Because every department has their own data teams and not much take enterprise MD teams seriously as they don't want to share their data. So it becomes another layer of complexity. What do you see with the largest organizations?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what we were talking earlier. I'm working with some of the very large financial service companies, probably in that scale. So you're absolutely right. They're not sharing the data, but what's happening is the centralized team, and this is what the theme, if you look at the discussion we're doing, is the centralized teams are not handling data. They're building the platform. They're building the capabilities. They're building the guardrails. So in some of these environments, actually, the data products are built by the business domain team. So let's say I'm in the credit risk team. I'll build my own data product. That means I'll bring my own data. I'll curate it. I'll put governance around it. I'll put security. And then I will decide to build a data product that I can share. And I decide how it's shared with my account. So a central team is not involved in that, but the central team, the platform team, has provided the capabilities to the data product team within domain. So to how to bring in data from a mainframe. You don't need to replicate that in every line of business. That's a capability you build once. And now as part of building my credit data product, maybe I have to build the data. So I do that. So I build my data product and I share. Somebody else, same type of capability they use for a different domain and they build their own data product. And so that's what I'm seeing in large organizations. The data sharing is happening through the concept of governed data products, where these data products get published into a central internal marketplace where a consumer gets it. So you control as the owner of your data how you want to expose it. You protect the data. So if that data has sensitive data, you are responsible for protecting that. You're responsible for exposing. You're responsible for making sure it's good quality. And you're responsible for making sure the data has enough semantics around it. So if somebody decides to build an agent against your data product, right? Quality is there, semantics are there, business meaning is there, it's accessible, the data is near real time, all those things you bake into the data products. That's where I'm seeing in large organizations, they're not centralizing the work of it, but centralizing the platform building capabilities like we have been talking in this entire webinar around governance and controls and capabilities, things like that.
Excellent. So we're almost up against time, but I do want you guys to give one piece of advice, perhaps rapid fire in 20 seconds or so each, for the CDOs and CIOs listening. What's the one piece of advice you would be giving them in terms of getting their data and AI organization ready for the next 12 to 24 months?
I can go first. I would say focus more on operating model and culture and governance issues and less on tools and technology. Because I think in the next 12 to 24 months, the only winning AI solutions are going to be one that can consistently translate data into decisions at a scale. So I think focus on your organization and your operating model rather than just the technology.
That's perfect. I don't have to say anything, but let me add one or two things. We talked a little bit about data foundation. Make sure that you build a proper scalable one. The big one for me is start with the business value and co-create solutions. If you co-create your solution with your business, it is easily acceptable. Otherwise, it becomes a technology project, which is a disaster.
Yeah. Sharad.
Yeah, last one, I'll kind of summarize it because the way I think of it is both parts, what both of them say. One, I would advise is make sure your AI agentic use cases that you embark on align to value use cases. I think one thing I'm seeing a lot now from last year was more about productivity enhancement. This year, more about how do you create value from it? How do you grow market size, reach, revenue, profitability? So make sure, and Gopal iterated that, make sure it's tied to business value. And the second part, which Aaron said, is make sure you build your data foundation right so you can enable all this AI innovation. Because simple way I look at it, without a trusted data foundation, you're not scaling AI, you're really scaling the risk.
Beautiful. All right. So look, I think this has been an excellent discussion. I thank you so much for participating. And my takeaways are the same as yours. It's about whether you can build an organization that can combine trusted data, enough context and decisions, and the right human roles around increasingly autonomous systems. But it's so much about those operating models that you've articulated so well. The winners won't necessarily just have more AI. They'll have clear operating models, better defined accountability, stronger context, and a tighter link between data work and business value. And this is what we want to help you with here at Click as well. So do not hesitate to reach out to us if there are any further questions. There was so many questions we couldn't address. So clearly this was a thought-provoking topic. But I thank you so much for, I thank you panelists, and I thank all of the people that listen to this discussion. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.